I think there's been a real shift sort of, or a split, I should say, where it's like a lot of people are really struggling right now. And I'm seeing a lot of people that are really thriving right now. And that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in going down that road. And, you know, the old world is never coming back. You know, the world of January 2020, it ain't coming back. So what I'm interested in doing is going down that path where people will thrive. Not because they believe everything I believe or want to live exactly how I live, but because you can figure it out for yourself. The person watching this can figure it out for yourself. But if you're in the rat race all day, if you never give yourself a moment to think, when I chatted with Eckhart Tolle, as I mentioned before, one of the things we talk about is just a little bit of space. We are now blasting ourselves with so much information all the time, which is often just nonsensical information. You know, we're hit with other people's thoughts all day long. That's why it seems like we're so angry at each other, because all day long, if you're on Twitter, it's just someone's thought, someone's thought, someone's thought, someone's thought. You realize that you hate a lot of people you used to like. You like some people you used to hate. I mean, there's all sorts of weird stuff happening. But how often is it? Remember the old days? How old are you, Matt?
I'm
We're
38. 38. I know people always... Okay. People think I'm 58, but I am 38.
No, all right, so we're ballpark. You're a young buck, but we're ballpark same age.
But see, I'm from Australia, so the internet came in much later in Australia, so we probably had a similar experience.
Exactly. And you have, you know, much bigger spiders over there and snakes and things. But, you know, remember in the old days, say 15, 20 years ago, when you'd go to a bar to meet a friend, and if your friend wasn't there, what would you have to do? You know, you'd say, we're meeting at 8 o'clock at the bar. You'd have to stand on the corner or outside the door and just wait. And then if they weren't there after 20 minutes and you started wondering, what would you do? You'd have to walk to a payphone and try to call them. And most likely they weren't home because they were, you know, en route. But the point is that you would sometimes just stand somewhere. And I spent most of my formative years in New York City, which it's so depressing now what's happened to New York City. It's become such a disaster. But like those moments of New York City when you're just standing on a corner watching people, I mean, that's like as good as it gets. But we don't give ourselves when is the last time you just had a moment where you just put your hands in your pocket and just kind of looked around, looked around for a while. So last year we were home because of the lockdowns. But when we did it 2 years ago, we had a really nice beach, really pristine, beautiful waters, fish, scuba diving, snorkeling, the whole thing. And I'm looking around at the beach and almost everybody is just taking pictures of the beach. Almost everybody is FaceTiming or TikToking about the experience on the beach, walking into the water with the phones, all that stuff. And, you know, when you're 2-3 weeks off the grid at that point, you're basically looking at these people like they just escaped a mental institution.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, man. As a teenager, if you wanted to get a hold of me, there were only 3 ways that I can think of. You would call the phone that was bolted to my kitchen wall.
Do that.
You could send me a letter in the post, or you could, or you could come to my house, and if I wasn't there, you could go up to the shops and look for me. So yeah, and then you contrast that today. How many ways and avenues do people try to get a hold of you? I just can't keep up with it. Here's an analogy I had recently that really helped me kind of better articulate this. I was home visiting Australia. We live in a very small country town where nothing much happens. But this one day I was there was a police raid taking place across the road, and it was surrounded by police officers who were shouting into the house, and this is very exciting for Port Pirie, South Australia. And so my mum and my dad and my brother and my sister were all kind of standing at the door looking through, wondering what's going to happen. I went out to get some lunch or something, and I come back, same thing's happening, right? And this lasted all day, and at the end, nothing, I don't think much happened. Maybe he got arrested, but it was quite quietly, and off he went. And I think like that door into that exciting reality is like this phone. It's like I can spend my whole day just standing at the door, as it were, looking into something exciting that's not actually satisfying or meaningful.
That's a great analogy, because we're spending so much time on this thing, and in most cases, we're not exactly sure why we're doing it. You know, you open up Twitter, let's say, or you go on YouTube, and it's one thing if you're like, I'm opening up YouTube because I've been thinking about this thing and I want to see a how-to video on how to grow a garden, or there's some problem I want to solve, or I really want to see this debate between two great thinkers, or whatever it is that you like, right? Like you're a video gamer and you want to watch somebody play a a level that you haven't been able to complete. Whatever it is. I'm not saying all of this is bad, but your point is right. Like it seems as if there's this incredible, exciting thing happening all the time. And actually that's not quite true. In the 4 summers now, the 4 August that I've done this, yes, some things have happened while I've been gone. Kamala got announced as VP. The year before John McCain passed away, there was a big hurricane and disaster, I think, in the Houston area one year. There's always little political stories. Last year, that song WAP, about this song? That was the big song of the year. WAP came out. People were freaking out. And even if, this year I've been thinking, man, the world feels kind of nuts. It's like Joe Biden's brain could explode this month. Like, would it surprise me if I came back 30 days from now and they said, Joe Biden's eye actually popped out of his head while he was doing a CNN town hall? Or if they said, basically Kamala's president. Or if they said, it's not the Delta variant anymore, it's the super Delta variant. And they're, there's so many things that could happen. But the simple truth is that even though I provide some level of sanity for my audience, and I love what I do, as I said, it's like, I'll come back and it'll still be here and it'll still be wacky. And sometimes it'll be good and fun. And sometimes it'll be depressing and horrible. But if I give myself the opportunity to really restore myself, really come back clean, I think you know this. When I came back, I believe it was the second year that I went off the grid, I said, I'm no longer an atheist. I mean, that's pretty powerful. That I don't think I would have given myself the room to do that had I not, or I wouldn't have had the room to do it. It's not about giving myself the room. I wouldn't have had the room to go where I went and to think about the things that I was thinking about and to read some of the things that I was reading and talk to some of the people I talked to had I not decided to go off the grid.
So speaking of atheism, one of the things I'm going to be doing in August is, instead of carrying my phone in my pocket, I have a little copy of the New Testament. And so if I'm stuck in line somewhere or in an elevator, I can just pull that out and read a few verses. I
love that. I love that.
Are there any spiritual practices you've begun engaging in since sort of turning away from atheism, or not really? You're just still on this, journey or whatever?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny. So I think it was the second year that I went off the grid, if I'm not mistaken, that I came back. I'm 99% sure. I can go back and check. And what happened was I was sitting on a beach and we had been there for about a week. And I'm one of those people, and I think it's partly because of what I do for a living. Like, I can really just, if I get out to that beach at 10 a.m., I can sit there till 6 p.m. and I'm fine. I don't need a book. I don't need an iPad. I do like to read, obviously, and because of COVID, as I said, the lack of travel, I'm looking forward to catching up on some reading. But I really am the type of person that I can just get on a beach, I'll nap, I'll wake up, I'll have lunch, I'll jump in the water. I don't need to be constantly stimulated, let's say. And it was in the course of that I had already started, I think, struggling with some of the atheism stuff. And I found myself believing almost against my personal intellect or something. I just felt that there is something beyond me that is going on here, that has been going on here, that all of the freedoms we have were won by people who believed that there was something greater than them, that they could build great things and all of those things. And when I came back on the grid, that's all I said. I just said, hey, I don't want to be referred to as an atheist anymore. I didn't say I figured out the meaning of life, or, I went on an ayahuasca trip and met Jesus or any of that kind of stuff. That's all I said. And ironically, I did get a lot of hate then, again, from the lefties who were like, oh, see what happens now. Now he's not an atheist anymore. He's not one of us and he's not an atheist. They're so tolerant, Yeah. But I would say on the spiritual side, I have I'm fortunate enough now to know of not a lot of extremely influential people, religious leaders and political leaders and things like that. And I've had a lot of really interesting conversations in the last couple of years on the show about that sort of stuff. I've read quite a bit. I'm Jewish, so I've definitely reconnected, especially on the tradition side of that. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've reread the Old Testament yet, but I actually do love your idea there of like a pocket New Testament. I think that's just spectacular. But I really am re-engaging in some of the traditions and the holidays and that sort of thing. So I think whatever level you can do something that adds order to your life, to loosely quote my friend Jordan Peterson, whatever that is. And it just became obvious to me that, from my tradition, let's say from the Jewish perspective, I come from a people with a pretty brutal 5,000 plus year history, but there's something that kept us going this entire time. There's something that my father believed, that his father believed, that his father believed, and maybe they didn't all believe it exactly the same or behave the exact same way within that. But if you sit down at a Passover table, you're telling the same story that your ancestors 400 years ago told. And by the way, that's the same story that 1,000 years before that your ancestors were telling. And that connection to me has become very powerful.
Yeah, very neat, very neat. If you like that clip, be sure to like and subscribe. Cheers.